Welcome back to our object-oriented course in Python programming. We are continuing our uh, deviation into the Pandas library. It occurred to me to go ahead and spend a few seconds actually Googling what Pandas stood for. That's short for panel data sets. In other words, data that's on a spreadsheet that you would see in Microsoft Excel. We'll load our usual libraries. And honestly, what I thought I'd do today is just do another lecture of this stuff so that you viewers, you, my students, have more examples available to you. And I thought I'd find us a bigger data set. We data scientists like this repository called Tidy Tuesday. Every Tuesday, volunteers submit and organize and submit a new data set for us data scientists to practice on. Over the past few weeks, some of the data sets included women's basketball, Beyonce and Taylor Swift lyrics, climbers of mountains in the Himalayas, government spending on kids, the TV show Friends, global crop yields, and so forth. Now, this being a biology class, I probably should do a biology example. Crop yields is nice, but not that many people are doing the broad biology. What's it called? Fieldwork biology. Maybe this one. Traumatic brain injury. Let's look at this one. So it's coming from the Brain Injury Association of America. And you can see that for the most part, the presenter of the dataset says typical causes of ABI acquired brain injury include electric shock, infectious disease, lightning strike, and some other causes. The bottom left bullet point, traumatic brain injury, TBI, is a type of acquired brain injury. A TBI is caused by trauma to the brain from an external force. So they have arranged things into a pie chart, but amongst serious researchers and scientists, we actually do not like pie charts. So we're going to try to do a little bit better here. At least see what we could do in about an hour. And the relevance is at least 5.3 million Americans live with a TBI related disability. The nice thing about Tidy Tuesday is that folks have already taken some pretty gnarly data sets and just give you a very quick glimpse of the code below. They've already cleaned this up for us in a way that it's going to be easy to analyze. So in other words, they've already done hours and hours of work so that we could just play with the data. There are 3 data sets here. It looks like one's about the age of the patients with traumatic brain injuries, and one's about the years in which the cases of traumatic brain injuries were recorded. And since there's a lot of information coming out of the military, a third data frame about where the traumatic brain injuries were recorded amongst the military branches, that is. But after all of that, fortunately, there's a line of code per data set, or per data frame, I should say, that allows us to bring this data into our Jupyter session. So I'm going to simply and copy and paste the code, but they use R code and we use Python. So I'm going to make the necessary changes to Python. Python uses equal signs. These are CSV files, comma separated values, and thus we're going to use the read CSV function. But you might recall that here in Python, that read CSV function comes from the Pandas library. So we need to type it that way, pd.readcsv. For each data frame. Okay. And cross my fingers, hopes this works, and nothing seems to go wrong so far. We'll once again look at the data. We can see in the first data frame, we have age groups, the type of hospital visit, how the injury occurred. Remember, traumatic brain injuries are from external forces. Number estimate and rate estimate, what were those? Let me keep this information in the notes. So today's data set is about traumatic brain injuries. The source is Tidy Tuesday. I know many of you are biologists, but folks like me are not, so it's useful to sometimes keep a glossary of what's going on here. For example, down here in the data set, we have a couple of columns that says number estimate and rate estimate. Going back to the documentation, the number estimate is the estimated observed cases in the year 2014. Some injuries are more common than others, so you normalize that. And the rate estimate is the previous number divided by 100,000, also in the year 2014. just trying to keep some of the information on the page here. Using the info command, we could get a more sophisticated look at the data. We have 231 observations, indexed from 0 to 230. Once again, the age group, type of hospitalization, I believe. Type of measure, sorry. How the injury occurred, the number of those types of injuries that happened in the year 2014, and the rate per 100,000 people. The first three variables are categorical in nature, and the last two variables are numerical in nature. You could see at the top that our data type is our Pandas data frame. And we'll finally get into words like object and class next week. So what I think I want to do see if I could do this. Something I haven't done in a while. Words injury mechanism is kind of awkward, but they already used the word type above, so I'm avoiding the word type there. But the issue is that because the data is arranged per patient, it's at the moment difficult for us to make more generalizations, such as like what is the most common way people got this type of injury, the traumatic brain injury. So let me see if I could figure this part out. Now, when I should have just done this on screen. When you Google something, quick side note, I'm going to Google on my side computer first, just to make sure everything's okay, and then show it on screen. Okay, so when you Google something, there's a wealth of information available to you. But as you might have figured by now, when you Google pandas, this is what you get. Depending on what Google knows about you. Like for me, the first three search results are about Python, but maybe that's because who I am. So, and thus, later on, my advice to you is if you need to Google some information, remember to put the word Python in front so that Google knows what you're talking about. So I'm doing a procedure called group by. think what I could do is this. I'm going to take the age data frame. Going to group by type. Oh, age. Like so. Age is not defined. Age group. Still an error because I used age group as a variable, because I was supposed to put that in quotes, right? Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we're getting a little closer. The age groups are condensed a bit. Let me see if I could add up the numbers. There we go. So this is a little ugly, but now we have the number of traumatic brain injuries per age group. Actually, I think I'm going to leave it ugly for a bit. We're going to next use the Seaborn package once again to make ourselves a bar chart. Whew. Kind of a complicated error, isn't that? See if I can fix this. The issue is that this is kind of subtle. You'll notice back here in this latest data frame, the age group is actually not its own column. It's actually the names of the rows. It's kind of weird, isn't it? So I need pandas. Remove the index, drop index, reset index. It's not quite what I want. Move the index to a column. Good old Stack Overflow. Let's just reset index, right? Okay, there it is. Now I have age group as its own column rather than the names of the rows. That's called the index. I don't think we'll need the index as a skill otherwise, so I'm going to leave as index as false. And now I believe things are a little better there. See if the bar plot works out. There we go. Now I've forgotten to save the final result of the data frame. Alright. It's not a perfect graph by any means, but I'm going to have you discuss that. So remember that we're talking about traumatic brain injuries. And let's have a few people talk about what you see in the graph. Okay, so reading off some of the observations here. Several folks observed that the 0 to 17 age group had relatively higher occurrences, whereas the 65 to 74 age group had relatively lower occurrences. Okay, so thank you for those responses. Let's go ahead and continue. Let me try to improve this graph a bit. The couple of things you might have noticed along the way, the numbers are not in order, or at least not completely in order. I think what I'm going to try to do is remove some of the categories on the bottom, especially the total category. That's one that's skewing all the results. So let's see if we could keep going there. The skill called filtering means that we're going to select certain rows of the data frame. So now if I do this line of code, it takes out the last bar of the bar chart because it says everything, use everything that's not equal to total. And I could do that a few more times. There's some, for some reason, there's some bars here that overlap. So now that I got rid of the bars that overlap, now the picture is a little more clear. Let me go ahead and then, with this in mind, ask a few more people to describe what we have so far. next group of people get this graph here. Let me see if I could split my screen for the folks. There we go. For the folks that are looking at the code. Okay, so seeing what we have so far. folks are noticing that the first and last age groups have the most traumatic brain injuries. It's a kind of a U-shaped distribution. Because we got rid of some of the, loosely speaking, odd columns from the previous graph, we have kind of a more even distribution. Definitely because we're not combining or having any overlapping patients here. Okay, awesome. So the question people usually ask around this time is, are the numbers affected by the population sizes? How many people are in each age group? I mean, after a while, doesn't it make sense for perhaps older people to have fewer brain injuries because there are fewer older people in the first place? So what we're going to do is look at the normalized numbers. And now it's the cases per 100,000 people. Earlier in the code, we were looking at the number estimated. Sorry, in my brain I thought I was going to have to do like a 5-minute explanation there. Now we are looking at changing the y value to rate estimated. And there we go. Notice that the graph is different than before. Let me see if I could briefly show you the graphs at the same time. Same deal for this next group of people. Once again, what I did was I changed the y-axis, the variable on the y-axis. if you're still typing, feel free to continue typing. Now, I would argue this is a more accurate graph than what we've had in previous cases, in previous graphs. The bars do not overlap in the numerical age groups. We have now compensated for how some age groups might have more people than other age groups. And moreover, the bars probably fit your intuition better. You see, between the ages of 25 to 65, the injury rate is about uniform, it's about even. That there's nothing special between those 4 bars in the middle from ages 25 to 65. Young adults and teenagers, the 15 to 24 age group, maybe a little bit more prone to injuries for whatever reasons. And then, especially of note, as the volunteers have indicated, the elderly population, particularly those over 75 years old, they're the ones being affected much more often for these traumatic brain injuries. Okay, so what I think I'll do is the other one. I want to take the original data frame. Wording still awkward because the word type was used somewhere else. Otherwise, I would say type. Here, the data set called this injury mechanism. And we have it grouped together a little bit closer right now. Some of the mechanisms include assaults, intentional self-harm, unintentionally struck, and a couple of other causes here. Now that it's gotten to the point where I know my previous set of code works, I'm going to try to recycle it. But this time I'm talking about the injury mechanism, not the age. Nice. There we go. Somewhat decent chart there, but it's very hard to read. So what I think I'll do is flip the X and Y axes. I believe that's simply a matter of literally switching what's on X and what's on Y. There we go. These numbers are in the 100,000s, by the way. last group of people, thanks for your patience. You get the last graph here. Go ahead and describe it. Okay, so what some of you have observed is that the unintentional falls are the most common cause of a traumatic brain injury. And like Sam Arda said, it's good in some sense compared to the more violent or more intentional versions of the causes for the traumatic brain injuries. Thank you all for that input. Now, there's one more skill I wanted to show you. I honestly thought this data set would be good for that, but the numbers did not quite play out that way. So we're going to go back to the brains we were looking at last time. Let me see if I could bring up the brains. So quickly, I might have skipped some grammar here. The picture at the top of your screen right now, amongst the two pictures, is a typical brain of a healthy patient. And the bottom is a brain of a patient that was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. We were talking about this last time. And I had brought in the information as a Pandas data frame. Using the read CSV command. And what we started to get towards the end of last time was that, as we were probably told in biology classes, the patients with Alzheimer's disease tend to have a smaller brain volume than the patients that are disease free. Now, before I forget, it's probably due to more than one reason, but for now, let's just practice a quick calculation. The way Alzheimer's was indicated in the data set was either true or false, a Boolean variable. So another way to go through the data is what's called a locator. And some more jargon. A series is one column of a data frame. And we're going to quickly separate the information into two series. One with Alzheimer's disease and one without. You might recall from your statistics class way back when, it was probably Math 15, Bio 18, Psych 10, or Econ 15. There was a procedure called the t-test. And I had loaded a function from the SciPy stats library called t-test. So we could use that here. Since we've already extracted the data from the data set, we could simply plug in the two series. And get the p-value. I forgot if I even mentioned the null hypothesis out loud. Let me read that again. Null hypothesis. Alzheimer's brains and typical brains have the same size. Recall that your stats teacher told you that the null hypothesis uses an equal sign. So for the moment, we say that the claim is that the brains are the same size whether or not the patients have the disease. We put the interesting hypothesis in the alternative. Alzheimer's brains are smaller than the typical brains. So since the p-value is less than 0.05, we reject the null hypothesis of equally sized brains, implying that, as we saw in the box plot, that the Alzheimer's brains are smaller than the healthy brains. But a couple of trends we encountered along the way last time is that older people had smaller brains, and also women tend to have smaller bodies than men. So that might throw off our calculations a bit. So we make sure we once again normalize the data. In this setting, we could make a new column called brain percentage. What percentage of your head does the brain take up? And that's simply the brain volume divided by the skull volume. Now that we've taken more careless calculations, the rest will follow pretty quickly, but the box plot still looks easy to interpret. We'll split the data into two series, run the t-test, get the p-value. This time looking at the brain percentage, not just the brain volume. Once again, we have shown with our skills and statistics that the claim of equally sized brains was not backed up. So we could go with the alternative hypothesis that the Alzheimer's brains are indeed smaller than the healthy brains. Right. Personally, I like days like these when I could just pick up a new data set, mess around with it, see what's going on. But hopefully I was coherent enough that you all could be introduced to something. Let me know how things went in the reflection, and that will be it for today. Thank you.